start recording and then, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for making it to this session. We think this will be first of a few more sessions, and the idea really is to um, get people who collect speech samples across many psychiatric disorders have the ability to do clinical rating of these without having, a long clinician level training. So this is really using rating scales, which doesn't require a background in psychiatry or psychology, but the rating scales that gives you scores that are clinically meaningful. So with that preamble, I just want to say this is part of our discourse group. I think many of you are in the network, and this is possible because we are now funded for a project called Dialogue, which is a Wellcome Trust funded project. Ranjini is the coordinator at our site for this project, and she's funded by the Wellcome Trust. So many of you here may also be part of the Dialogue project as well, and we will use the recording in a public repository. We'll put it on YouTube, for example, so people can use it in the future. Now, if anyone has any objections for recording, please, this is the time to speak, or else you can't speak any further. You're all okay with that? Excellent, good. If you want to switch off your video, that's okay as well for the recording. But I think the YouTube version that we will put out will usually have only the speakers phase on it. Okay. So the idea today is to give you some background, some context of this rating scale called TLI, Thought and Language Index, and give you some rules of rating which you can apply in your own sites, and also give some examples of how this rating is actually done. Before I get into this, it'll be useful for me to know how many of you here has used TLI scale. You can unmute and share your experience. Anyone here who's used TLI for administration or scoring? Okay, I think I don't see anyone raising the hand, so I will assume that we have a group of people who are going to use it for the first time. This really helps me to focus on what I need to say. Um, We have a couple of hours, as I said, but we'll break it. And if you need a break, we'll take a 10 minutes break and come back. So let me start with background and context. So this is the scale that was developed largely by Peter Liddell. So you see Peter's picture here. We took a nice walk around the Lake District last year. This is Peter with his little hiking stick. Peter, when he was in Vancouver, created this scale mainly because the phenomena of thought disorder, formal thought disorder, it's not easy to rate clinically. Clinicians like myself, some of you in the group as well, we often miss it, mainly because we don't spend enough time with the patients. If you spend a lot of time, maybe you will be able to see some disorganization, some thought disorder, but most of us don't have the time, number one. Number two, this is a symptom that's really a sign that is really elicited by doing some tasks. When people are talking about things that are very neutral, they may hold things together and you may not see any signs of thought disorder. So you have to elicit them by performing some maneuvers. And one of the maneuvers that you can do is giving them pictures, asking them to describe those pictures. And that's exactly what TLI does. It gives stimulus, and that stimulus is described. There is a descriptive account of the stimulus provided by the person, the patient, and then we go back to the recorded transcript of that stimulus of the speech and use sentence by sentence. We look at it and use the information there to do rating. Generally, administration of TLI has two forms. The original form is a full scale that took around 15 minutes to administer, 8 pictures. And the newer form that we are using as part of discourse is a briefer version. It has only 3 pictures. Administration takes around 3 to 5 minutes, and it's part of the discourse protocol. You don't have to do it separately. If you're using the discourse protocol, you already have enough to do the TLI ratings. In fact, this is the only part of discourse protocol from which you can do a direct clinical rating. We have other questions as well in the protocol, but we don't have any standardized ways of rating those sections. This is why it's important to include the picture description every time you do a discourse protocol application. Any questions on that so far, the idea of TLI? Um, when Peter initially started developing this tool, at that time we had TLC available, which is Nancy Andreassen's tool, Thought and Language and Communication Index, Communication Scale, and then you also had TDI, which is Thought Disorder Index, that was developed by Halsman and colleagues. This is long time ago, but these scales, well, TDI, for example, very psychodynamically oriented to start with, and developed from psychodynamic principles of ambiguous picture descriptions, focused a lot more on illogical thinking, almost exclusively on one aspect of thought disorder called positive thought disorder. TLC was more balanced. It had positive and negative thought disorder. But the problem with both of these scales is they take a very long time to administer. So TLC, for example, you need to spend, if you want a good account of thought disorder, um, a 40 minutes interview or a 45 minutes interview. This is what Nancy Andreasen described in her original paper. So it takes a long time to do this kind of interviews, and in regular clinical practice, it's really challenging. So TLI was developed as a scale that can be administered during routine clinical contacts. So byproduct of routine clinical contacts, you can measure disorganization. This is the original paper. This came out in 2002 in British Journal of Psychiatry. It's open access, I think, at the moment. You can download this. It's a first assessment, first description of the scale, and validation of the scale. So these are the pictures that we use for TLI. They are taken from a very old instrument called TAT. And TAT stands for Thematic Apperception Task. This was prepared originally by Christina Morgan and Murray in 1935. So you can imagine how long ago this was done. But originally, these pictures were developed for psychodynamic purposes, to get people to talk about their mental account, to develop a mental account of stimuli that they were seeing. Basically, very related to Rorschach. Some of you might have seen Rorschach's test with ambiguous stimulus. But a lot of people had issues with providing ambiguous stimulus because often descriptions were quite out of the world, like not concrete descriptions. Patients say things that are not often useful for rating. So Rocha went out of fashion for a while, and people started using less ambiguous stimuli like TAT. This is not for thought disorder, this is just for psychodynamic purposes. But Peter relied on those pictures because they were already existing, well validated pictures for eliciting response from patients. So he adapted 8 of those pictures for his initial version of TLI. 3 of them are shown here, just samples. Couple picture, a dog picture, and a form picture. When administering TLI, you have to give these pictures one after the other, and you have to ask the person to talk for 1 full minute about each picture. And when the speech material is available, you can look at the material for 8 types of abnormalities that are present. And all of those 8 types of abnormalities are thought disorders. And they are defined and they are scored according to specified criteria. And we're going to see what the criteria is in a few minutes' time. And the idea here is not based on linguistics. So the descriptions, the items are not things like syntax or semantics. It doesn't use any words like that. It doesn't use any linguistic terms, this particular scale. It also avoids using metaphorical terms like tangentiality, flight of ideas, things like that. These are very metaphorical. The problem with metaphorical terms is everyone can interpret them differently. And these terms are used very often in thought and language scales. TLC, for example, TALD even, for example, uses a lot of metaphors. But TLI doesn't use metaphorical descriptions. So these are the principles of the original version of TLI. And then the rules of administration of that is you have to give more or less a standard description when you give the picture. So you need to say simply, tell me what you see in the picture. This is your first picture. Tell me what you see in the picture. That's all you say to the patient. You don't say anything like, I'm going to give you a picture, it's black and white, it has 3 characters, tell me what you see, make up a narration or a story. You don't say anything like that. You only say, I'm going to give you a picture. This is your first picture. Tell me what you see in this. Sometimes people with psychosis, especially schizophrenia, don't initiate conversation easily. It takes a long time for them to say anything. If the hesitancy or the pause that people produce is more than 10 seconds, then we can use some prompts. to make them, keep going on conversation. These prompts have to be really carefully done. They cannot be specific prompts. So you cannot say, tell me something about that woman that you see in the picture. You cannot say something like, which country is this taking place in? What kind of season? You cannot ask those kind of questions. You need to put prompts that are very generic. Some example prompts are given. So for example, you can say, anything else in the picture? Can you tell me more? What else can you see? What do you think is happening? So these kind of questions can be prompts, and you use them only after at least 10 seconds of pause. Now, when you're administering the scale, it's really important to get used to the 10 seconds pause, because many of us have problems in tolerating pause during normal conversations, and we don't track the length of pause. As soon as it becomes uncomfortable, we interrupt or we try to fill the gap. I have the problem a lot, so I know this firsthand. We need to learn how to kind of mentally calculate these 10 seconds. If you have a timer when you administer it, that's fine. You can actually see whether 10 seconds have passed, but sometimes it's very awkward to keep looking at your watch when people are pausing. So you have to have some ability to gauge how long is problematic for a pause. Not for you, but in general, how long is problematic for a pause to go on. 10 seconds is the rule. So if it's longer than 10 seconds, if it reaches 10 seconds, you prompt and you ask people to talk more. So this goes on, people keep talking, and at the end of 1 minute, here you need a timer. At the end of 1 minute, you have to say, thank you. Now, this picture is finished, done, and you move to the next picture. Now, in the original TLI, we have some follow-up questions after 1 minute. And these follow-up questions are based on some oddities that people may have in the picture description. So they may use an odd word, or they may have a logic that seems unreasonable for you. So the follow-up questions in the original TLI included asking specifically about those odd things that people have said. Now, we don't use those follow-up questions in our discourse protocol, largely because it becomes very unstandardized in some sense when people are asking different questions, leading, the participants in different directions. Plus, also this can be time-consuming. So, for time economy as well as to improve reliability, we don't do follow-up questions in the discourse protocol as such. So these are the modifications for the discourse protocol of TLI. We use only 3 pictures, and these 3 pictures are selected on the basis of another study that was done several years after Peter's original study. This was led by Iris Sommer in Netherlands. And in this study, they showed just 3 pictures have reasonable validity, have very high correlation with 8 picture version of TLI. So this cuts down time. And in particular, they showed that 3 pictures are enough to get thought disorder elicited even in healthy people. And that's really the point of TLI, to measure thought disorder as a continuum, not as a pathological entity, but continuum that's also present in all of us. Well, when I say all of us, I think if you let some people speak for a long time, you'll see how thought disordered they are. It happens often to me. If I speak more than 45 minutes, I get disorganized, I get tangential. So this is a common phenomenon. This is not specific for patients. This is not specific for schizophrenia. And three-picture version allows us to measure this even in healthy people. And as I said, we don't ask follow-up questions, and we interrupt at 1 minute, but we never let people speak more than 2 minutes in the discourse protocol. And this is because discourse protocol is not used just for schizophrenia. We try to use it for bipolar disorder, schizoaffective illnesses. Some people who are manic may keep speaking. For example, you have to really have a hard stop, or else your whole assessment will keep going. So at 1 minute, you ask them to stop. The picture is done. If they keep holding on to the picture and keep going on, don't let them speak for more than 2 minutes. Change the picture or ask them to hand the picture over to you. This is rare. This doesn't happen that often, but these are the rules to play by. If you're interviewing someone who is uninterruptible, try to put a hard stop at second minute. Easy to say, sometimes difficult to do, but at least when you're recording it, you will know 2 minutes are over, so we won't analyze any data that's less than 1 minute. We won't analyze, but if it's more than 2 minutes, the quality of the second question, third question may not be very good. It really affects the overall quality of analysis that you can do with speech recordings. So these are the descriptions. This is the standard way we put it forward for when we use discourse protocol. Um, the same statement I said earlier. You just keep the picture and say, I'm going to show you 3 pictures one at a time. When I put each picture in front of you, I want you to describe the picture to me as fully as you can. Tell me what you see in the picture, what you think might be happening, and keep talking until I stop you. So this is the preamble that you give. You can read it verbatim if you want. And then you give the first picture and then say, this is your first picture. Tell me what you see in this picture. Every time you give the picture, you just give that particular statement. Now, if you want to know how the actual administration has been done in some studies, we have a video for this. This is available on YouTube. In fact, the whole discourse protocol, there has been recordings of administering it. This is Mike McKinley and this is Sabrina Ford. They did the very initial setup of some of the data collection for the discourse protocol. This was done during COVID time, so you can see there is a mask here. So the quality of the video is not perfect, unfortunately, because the mask muffles some of the sounds, but still good enough for you to see how the administration goes. Remember, Mike is a healthy person, so for in this context, so there is no obvious rating that you can do with this particular video fragment, but it's useful to see um, how well how the administration takes place in the discourse study. Right, let me stop here and ask people questions. Let me just see if I can see all of you. Right. Any questions so far on TLI? The concept, the background? Everybody following so far? Okay.
Lena,
Yeah.
one quick question. I mean, you said a minimum of 30 seconds. I mean,
Yes.
so you keep trying to prompt, and if you get a zero
Yeah.
response, you
So this is really for mute select. No, some people who are really mute or not saying much. So after 10 seconds, you prompt them. They're saying nothing. They're still mute. You prompt them again after 10 seconds, but don't provoke them by, doing this for the whole minute. Stop after 30 seconds. Again, very rare in our research settings, Neil, because, unfortunately, we don't recruit this kind of patients. It's a problem as well for us, right? Okay, any other questions on that? Excellent. Okay, let me move on to some principles. If I give this picture to you, what is the likely output that you're going to produce when you have a picture in front of you, when you describe the picture? What are the likely outputs? So let's look at the grounding, what kind of things we can expect when anybody describes a picture. So when I give a picture to any of you, if you have a minute to describe, it's very likely you will use more than 50 words because the general rate of speech, whatever language you speak, doesn't matter, it's Italian, German, English, Tamil, whatever it is, we produce words at a specific rate. And what we know is on average, even people who speak less, people who are more kind of, shall I use the word introvert, not speaking a lot in new situations, might still speak around 50 words. So this is kind of normal range that you can expect. And that speech will happen. You will describe the picture without waiting for the interviewer to keep asking you to keep going on. So you won't need any prompts. If you know the instruction is 1 minute of talking, you will talk for 1 minute and you will produce at least 50 words. Sometimes we may run dry, especially in a tiring day in the evening. If you're doing a task, you may run dry. So you may need one prompt, but you rarely need more than a prompt to fill information in one full minute. Secondly, the things that you say about a picture will be informative. It will tell something to the person listening to you. It'll be sufficient in quantity. It'll have multiple elements. It'll be diverse. It'll be rich in its description. These are some of the Grecian maxims we follow when we talk to each other. We know how much to say. We say we know how much to communicate. We also know what to say to keep the other person engaged. So generally, our output is sufficient in quantity. It engages the other person and wouldn't sound empty. There will be content in it which the other person can understand. And we don't repeat the same thing. We don't keep talking about the same stuff, thankfully. So within a minute in particular, we don't keep saying the same thing. Um, and most of us won't drift off fully from the task. We may drift a little bit, but we come back if we do that. And most of us even don't do that. We stay on the task. We describe the picture. We may run out of ideas, in which case we may use our imagination and we may speculate, but we still complete the task in a minute. And generally speaking, whatever language, whatever background we come from, Our statements will make sense because they have a specific grammar, will put things in a way that makes sense to the person listening to us. So they may not be grammatically excellent, but they will be grammatically correct. The other person can understand. There will be an order in the way that we say things. And if you make some mistakes, it happens very often when you speak a second language. You may say things that are a little awkwardly phrased, but often you correct it yourself. You'll come back and say, no, this is what I meant. Or you'll say, if you use an article in a wrong way, you'll correct it. And this is normal. This is healthy. We do that all the time. And generally, we don't use words that nobody has heard of. We use words that are in the vocabulary, in the common parlance, so to speak. We may use slangs, but those slangs will be appropriate to the context, to the time, and to the person that we're speaking with. We may not use slang to a person who's very unlikely to have any sense of what we're saying. So these are common aspects of communication, especially when you describe a picture, describe an object. And when we explain something, when we give some causal explanation to something in the picture, those causal explanations are logical. They're generally grounded on visual evidence, and they appear plausible. They don't appear out of the world when we explain something. And if you're not sure, we hedge it. What I mean by hedging is we'll say something like, maybe this is happening, perhaps, or sort of, kind of. We put some of these qualifiers before we say anything causal because we're not sure about it. And this is all normal. None of this is pathological at all. And like I said, we stay on the task. We don't, listen to what's going on outside. We don't move away from the picture description task within a minute. For most of us, this is true. You may get an occasional phone call that disturbs you, but that is not what I mean here. Distractibility is going and describing something on the wall, for example, or talking about the interviewer's shirt or hairstyle or whatever. Those kind of things are distractions, and we generally don't do that. We have a task, we have an object, and we stick to it. Now, all of these items or any of these items could be disturbed in people with psychiatric illnesses or even people who are having symptoms without any diagnosable disorders. And you can classify the 8 items, 8 deviations. You can describe them under these topics. You can classify them into 2 broad areas. One is impoverishment of thinking. Thinking becomes impoverished or poor, not sufficient in quantity. That's number one, sometimes called negative FTD, negative formal thought disorder. The other aspect is positive formal thought disorder, often called disorganization of thinking. This is where you have peculiarities, illogicalities coming in. So Peter's scale has 8 items. So he describes poverty of speech, weakening of goal. This is actually wrongly spelled. It's perseveration of ideas, not preservation. Perseveration of ideas. So these 3 things are classed as impoverishment of thinking in the original scale. Looseness, having incidental comments, for example. Peculiar use of words, new words nobody can understand. Peculiar construction of sentences. Peculiar logic, arguing without evidence, for example. Those things are, and also distractibility. Those things are classed under positive FTD in the original scale. Now you'll see that I have highlighted in red 2 items, and I'm showing here they are called dysregulation of thinking. So when Peter initially developed the scale, he had these 2 FTD items, positive and negative. But when he did a factor analysis with the patients that he initially studied, he actually saw 3, not 2 factors. And the third factor was loaded on by perseveration and distractibility, these 2 items. They're not classical disorganization, they're not classical impoverishment. They borrow from both of these. So he gave a new term. He called this as dysregulation of thinking. Uh, Control that we have around our thought process is somehow gone. So we are repeating the thinking and we are getting distracted. So he called this dysregulation of thinking. Now, in many studies that we have done, neuroimaging studies later time, we don't see this kind of third factor coming because many people score 0 on distractibility. People just stay on task, even patients who are most affected. So we don't get this third factor coming leaping at us in many studies that we've done later on. Generally, when we rate TLI, we add the 3 items and call it positive FTD. We add the 5 items and call it negative FTD. Is that clear? Yeah. Okay, great. So let's see what each item is in a one-by-one fashion, and we'll also look at some examples and see how we can rate them. So let's start with poverty of speech. So poverty of speech is probably the most important negative FTD item. This is also called alogia in SANS scale. Also in Andreasen scale, sorry, also in PANS, it's called poverty of speech, reduced speech output. So these are items that are quite classical of negative FTD. This particular item is very classical feature of negative FTD. In fact, every time we said somebody has negative formal thought disorder, they've had some alogia, they had some poverty of speech. What is it? It's really speaking less. That's all it is. How much less? So within a minute, if people use less than 50 words, it's really a good indication that they have some poverty. If they speak 50 words without any prompt, they don't have poverty of speech. So it's a very clear rule here. If they speak 40 to 49 words, yeah, they probably have some poverty, but questionable, mild. What you will see in TLI is everything that's rated 0.25 is questionable. It could be present without severe pathology, but you're not sure it's completely normal. So those items are usually rated as 0.25. So 40 to 49, you might have used one prompt. One prompt is okay, but people produce only 40 to 49. This will be rated as 0.25. And if the sentences are brief, like people say very little, just list of words and not constructing sentences, or sentences are very short, and you need more than a prompt to keep them going for a minute to maintain the flow of speech, then that's more severe. That's 0.5. That's not questionable anymore. It's not normal to require more than a prompt. So you will then say it's zero point 0.5. You'll score it 0.5. If people require the first prompt straight away, like they're not saying anything for 10 seconds, they're pausing, and they're just saying, mm, don't know what this is. That's it. You just have to give them a prompt very early on. And you may have to give more prompts for these people who are saying very less. And even after prompting, people with this level of severity may not say a lot of stuff. They may say only like one sentence or two sentences. So after you, for example, if someone says, don't know what this is, and just doesn't say anything, you prompt them. You say, can you describe what you see? And then they say, it's a black and white picture. Mm, that's all they say. So you have to give out of the prompt if the pause is like 10 seconds. In that case, they're having more severe than zero point 0.5. They're really having a lot more poverty of speech. So number of prompts matters. And if you give more than one, it moves to 0.75, especially when the responses are brief. And the response to each prompt will be brief as well. Finally, the first prompt is required very quickly, and every prompt you gave produced very little response. So the responses could be just no. Do you see anything else? The patient says no. I'll show you some examples of that. So that's very intense poverty of speech. This is really like close to not getting anything useful from people. This happens in some chronic established patients with schizophrenia. We have some examples in our own data set of one. Not very common, but it's possible. So the point here is to rate poverty of speech, you need to know how many words that are spoken. You need to know how many prompts are given. You need to know how early did you have to use the prompt. And finally, you need to know what is the response to the prompts are like. Are they brief? Are they like voluminous? After the prompt, are they saying a lot more? All of these things together will decide where you score 0, 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, or 1. So let me look at the key indicators here. So this is like a tabular format of the same idea that previous slide was showing you. Clearly, if there is greater than 50 words, you just can't move to the next item. It's 0. There's no poverty. Speech is fluent. You may have to use a prompt, but it's less than one, almost always one or less than one. You never have to use two prompts when people are fluent. And don't count fillers as words when you're counting the words. So people might say things like, uh, hmm, quite often. Well, I'm in Canada. Is very common in Canada. You should not count these kind of words as words. These are non-words, they're fillers. So the actual count of 50 words should not include 50 ums or 50 a's. That doesn't count. Same for the every count you do, 40, 49, not fillers. Um, the brief sentences, the third one is brief sentences, less than 40 words, generally less than 40 words. As you would see, the scale itself doesn't say less than 40 means you have to give 0.5. But if it's more than 40, you would be looking at 0.25 for rating. Okay, so you can use this as a guidance for your own rating. If it's less than 40, look at how brief the sentences are and how many prompts are used. Very likely the person will fall at 0.5 for this one. And 0.75 if prompting was done very early, like after one single sentence or one word, the person paused for several seconds and the interviewer had to prompt. One thing you will see here is a lot depends on interviewers' behaviors as well. And sometimes interviewers behave differently despite all the instruction we give to them. When you're rating it, if you're not the interviewer who did the interview, just take it at the face value. Assume that the interviewer has done what is asked of them, so that you don't introduce another variation when you do the scoring. Okay, so that's really like tabulating how you score it, and I did this because it may be like helpful for you to look at some examples and some indicators of when you will give one, when you will give 0.75. Okay, let's look at this now. Let's see what ratings people give for that. Oh, Roosbe, you have a question?
Yeah, for count of words, do we count repeated words or words like, for example, like,
Yeah. Very
several times they would say probably, like.
Yeah, very good question. So nice question, Roosbay. You have to count repetitive words as well. You have to also count what is called they're not fillers. They're not empty fillers. These are like engaging words, words that people are using to engage with you as an interviewer. It's like those words are counted as well.
Mhm.
But hmm, uh, these are like really empty fillers. They don't serve any purpose. They don't have meaning on their own. If you just take that particular word outside of the context, they don't have any meaning. But like has a meaning, just has a meaning. So you got to use those words in the counting. Is that clear?
Yeah.
So we have an example here. What I have in italics is a prompt, and what you see without italics is the actual spoken sentences by the participant. This is in your training set. Now the training set has some dummy scores. They're all not correct scores, but we have just filled some scores to see how you do that, to give some guidance of how you can use an Excel sheet like that when you do the scoring. So this is training set one, picture number three. You already have these in the email that was sent by Ranjani. This is what the person has said, and they had sufficient pause that made the interviewer to interrupt and prompt this time. And then they had to use another prompt as well. So this went on for a minute. Actually, this person's minute ended somewhere here in the audio. So they're somewhere in the middle of the fertilizing thing in the audio. So they were really slow. They had a lot of pause when prompt was used. So here, one of the things we have done here for rating is looking at whether number of words, whether there are more than 50 or not. If you count this, it comes to 40 words. If you just count all of this within 1 minute, it comes to 40 words. And you can see the sentences are, first of all, number of words is less than 40. And you will also see the prompts used. There are two prompts, okay? One here and one here. And you will also see the sentences spoken by the participant are really brief. So this is like a prairie, and this the like people and a horse. It looks like a barn and the sky, mountains, rocks, stuff like that. So this is what they've said, and they're very brief. They're not like full descriptive sentences, like we speak when we are giving a lecture, for example. So this is brief, required more than a prompt, and had less than 40 words within 1 minute. So we've given a score of zero point 0.5 for this. So it's really important that you know how many words were spoken in a minute. And this is only available if the interviewer has interrupted correctly or said a minute is over, or if you have the audio where you can actually see when 1 minute has stopped for the participant. Right. So any questions on this? Did people give any other scoring for this? Anything different you gave? Yeah, just if you go back, you'll see the rubric, sorry, the rubric here. Point 5 is brief sentences. Well, this is the rubric for use, but if you can see the description here, sentences are brief. One or more prompts were needed to maintain the flow of speech. And this is exactly what happened for this person. If you count the words, they are around 40. I mean, you can still fit it into 0.25, but only up to one prompt is allowed for 0.25 because we had two prompts and the sentences were brief. And in fact, one of the prompt returned almost nothing if you look at it. Anything else you see, just the person said, no. So prompts are not very efficient here as well. Sentences are brief, but they speak around 40 words. They're not completely absent in their generation of thinking. So poverty of speech here would be zero point 0.5. We have some more examples of poverty of speech later on, but any questions on that? I think Federico, your hand went up, and then Jessica, I see your hand as well. So Federico first.
Yeah, I had a question that was not related to this specific exercise, but I was wondering how
Okay.
do you deal with the unclear words? But
Yes.
maybe we will get to it with
Yeah.
the other exercise, whether you count it or not.
Yeah, I think I gave you a deliberate example in the training set with a lot of unclear words. And this could happen sometimes when you record speech. People say things that are not very clear. Um, we have to count them for counting purposes. We have to assume those words are just not heard, but people have said a word. And it's not an exact science to know whether it's a full word or a filler word. It's not easy to do that. But if words have been heard on the audio, you don't know what they are, you just count them. So for the counting purposes, they're present. What what makes life difficult is if a lot of words are unclear, you can't make anything out of the content. You don't know how much illogical thing people have said. You won't know if the content is rich, was it descriptive. So it does create problems for rating other items. But for poverty of speech, at least you will be able to count the number of words for that. Okay. Jess, you had a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I'm wondering if you have someone with brief sentences, like in that example, if it would also be marked for like the peculiar sentences later on, would that be still like a 0.25 for peculiar? Or do
So
you try and keep it not
yeah,
doubled?
you're asking a very good question, the right question to be asked. When you have a 1 minute speech sample, and when you have one sentence that's problematic in some sense, okay, the same sentence could feed on to the score of poverty of speech. It could also feed on to the score of perseveration. It could also feed on to the score of illogicality. You don't have to delete a sentence because you scored it for one item. Does that make sense? Excellent. Okay, great. Rusbe?
Just to confirm what I could understand, the first section is just kind of only quantitative and very formal mechanistic
Correct. Rule based.
measuring. There's
Yeah.
no quality, nothing related to logic or if I understand the meaning of the sentence. If even if it is a word which is not
Clear.
understandable, but
Yeah,
you can say that this is probably a word that the
exactly.
participant has created in this part of the sentence that should be counted. No
Exactly.
matter if it makes sense, no
Mm.
matter if it is logical, no matter if there's any communication or something like that.
To explain it even further, they could even use a word from a language that you haven't heard, but you
Mhm.
would still count that as a word for
Okay,
popular speech. Is that helpful? Yeah.
perfect. Yeah.
So it's very rule based and very quantitative. The first thing is poverty of speech is. Um, if you don't like it, the rest of the stuff that you're going to see are more qualitative. It throws its own problems when you have less rules that you can apply because it calls for some subjective judgment, and this is where it's important for us to understand the concept, why each of them is rated, so we can minimize the mistakes we do in rating. So shall we move on to the next one? Weakening of goal. Weakening of goal is sometimes also called poverty of content of speech. I'm sure all of you among your own circle of friends will have some people who will say a lot but don't say anything at all. They say a lot of information. They give you a lot of, they use a lot of words, but if you just sit and count how many ideas they shared with you, it'll be zero. This is exactly what is called poverty of content of speech or weakening of goal. Um, empty, vacuous speech, which is full of quantity but lacks quality, doesn't have ideas sufficiently. And this happens simply because the linear drive that we have in thinking. So you ask a question, you show a picture, and my task is to give you a description of it. That's the goal. If for some reason that goal is weakened, I'm going to, go around, beat the bush and not really give you an answer that has any useful content. And this is poverty of content, weakening of goal, empty speech. And you rate it in four different categories. You will see there is no 0.75. There's only 0, 0.25, 0.5, and 1 for this. 0 is rich, quite descriptive, a lot of quality in the description. People use adverbs, adjectives. They don't just say man, dog, horse. They say a shirtless man who is trying to plow, and there is also a horse. Maybe the horse is owned by the man. So they make connection between elements. They describe the elements, and they try to make a story out of what they say. And if that's what you get, it's normal. It's completely rich and no weakening of goal. With 0.25 score, you have some questionable quality of how much content is being generated. So, for example, people will make a list of things. They may not connect the list. They may not put sentences to connect the list. They may just give one after the other, a large list of things, without making any narrations out of it. And that's unelaborated ideas. Unelaboration is 0.25. 0.5 is even worse. It's saying things which are very vague and in a very general fashion. So not saying there is a horse and there is a man for the form picture, but saying um, something is happening. Animals, maybe, some activity. If this is what they say, this is very generalized. Yes, they're using words. They may be using a lot of words, but this is very generalized and this is not really um, meaningful. You don't really get concrete ideas out of this. That's called generalization and not specific information. And that will be 0.5. That's not questionable. This is really pathological. So you put 0.5 there. 1 is the empty speech. When people do empty speech, they may say a lot of things actually. So the entire utterance may have a lot of words. They may tick the box of 0 for poverty of speech, the previous item. They may say enough. They may even score more than 50 words, completely 0. But those words may not have anything to do with the picture. They may say things like, hold on, let me describe, let me think, those kind of stuff, which are not really about the picture. They're words, but they're not really conveying anything at all for you. And sometimes they may start something and not finish it. What I see here in this picture is, let me think. That's it. It goes on for a while. They haven't said anything at all. They started a sentence without a content finishing the sentence. Those kind of things are empty speech. Again, very severe. So if we give a rating of 1 for this kind of stuff, not seen very often. Very often you will see 0.25 and 0.5. Some people will see 1. So the essential issue for weakening of goal or poverty of content is not that they speak less, is that they give less information even after speaking a lot. So the question is, can you rate it when people speak very less? Yes, you can still rate it. When people have only 2 sentences, you can still see for the given 2 sentences, how much is the quantity of ideas that you've got. If their ideas are like very few, they've spoken 20 words, but they haven't even conveyed a single idea, you will still be able to score for weakening of goal. So poverty of speech rating does not have to affect poverty of content rating. In practice, they usually go hand to hand. People who speak less will also have less content, but they don't have to be collinear. Is that clear? Right. So rich content, well integrated, story-like. You like listening to this kind of people. You keep going on. Sometimes these are the people who keep saying things you miss more than a minute. Very rich in content. But 0.25 is unelaborated, no descriptions. Often what I see in my experience with rating is people who make a list, just a list of items, go into 0.25. They make a list of large number of items. They may describe everything in the picture, but they don't really make a integration connection about various elements. So that's 0.25. 0.5 is generalization, as I said, very vague. And 1 is when you listen to people who are rated at 1, you'll see they've said something, but it was as if they spoke nothing about the picture. So that's the kind of feeling you will get when you listen to someone who is scoring 1. They may attempt to engage you. They may say, it's like, what is it, doc? The kind of stuff, but not really answering the task, not really describing anything in the picture. So look at this example. Here, the same example, picture 3 of the training set 1. What is this person doing? This is like a prairie. They're repeating it like a prairie. And this is like people and a horse. Looks like a barn, the sky, mountains, rocks, stuff like that. So you can see they're making a list. They're putting things like stuff like that. Often we also do that. We use this kind of stuff, but it is not really giving anything useful for a description. So here I've rated this person as 0.25 because they're making a list Yeah, they are specific. They're not general. They're not saying an animal. They're saying a horse. They're saying a prairie. They're not saying some landscape. So they're specific. They're not vague and generalized, but they're making a list. This is why I give them 0.25. I don't give them 0 because there is no narration coming out of it. In fact, this person does not even connect even two elements together. They don't connect the prairie and the horse. They don't connect the sky with the weather with the farming activity, for example, the farm picture. So this is 0.25. They're a little better in after the prompt. They're saying something that's a little bit more sentential. It looks like they're fertilizing because they have a horse. So they're making some causal connection, but again, it's very rare. They go back to repetition after that, as you will see here, and they say nothing else after the third prompt. So here 0.25 is a conservative score. You don't have enough to say 0.5 because they're not completely absent, and they're not completely vague, and they don't have complete empty speech as well. Any reflections on this? Questions? No? Okay, great. So that's 2 items done. How are we doing for time, Ranjani?
I think we're okay. We're likely to take 2 hours, like you said.
Okay, okay,
That's
right. So let's finish one or two more items, maybe. Have a break, 5-10 minutes, stretch your leg, and come back. Is that okay? Okay, this is the third item. Third is perseveration of ideas. Now, people who have done some practice in neurology often use the term perseveration. People with frontal lobe problems usually have repetition, perseveration. Perseveration is simply meaningless repetition, and you can see that in motor activity as well as in speech. For speech, the way we rate it using TLI is any repetition of ideas or themes. Themes could be words repeating itself, is picked as an example of repetition. And then you have to ask the question, is this repetition supported by evidence, or is this contrary to what is available? If the repetition is warranted or not. So you have to ask that. What is a warranted repetition? What is not a perseverative repetition? Sometimes we say things for emphasis. If I have said something unclear earlier, I may want to come back and clarify that for you. That is not perseveration. So that's not scored. In the previous thing, you see this guy saying, this is like a prairie, like a prairie. So he says, yeah, the word is repeating, but they're just making a false start, and they're trying to fill it by repeating the same information, showing the picture. So you don't have to score this kind of thing. You will score other thing, which is not for emphasis, not for clarity, but pathological. But that's an example of what you will not score if people are just clarifying something. If they're correcting a false start, if they're having stammering, if they're deliberately repeating for the emphasis sake, as I said, or if they're repeating to elaborate or summarize. For example, I could say, this is a horse, and then I can say, this is a horse that's kind of used for farming. I've said this is a horse 2 times, but the second time when I said this is a horse, the kind that's used for farming, I'm actually adding more quality. I'm elaborating it further for you. So we are connecting it and we are creating a narration out of it. That is not pathological. That is not perseveration. We don't rate for that as well. Okay. And if I do a summary, some of us speak a lot and we end up, we like ending up with summaries. We say, okay, so far I've told you there's a horse, there is a man, there's a farm scene. All of what I've seen is a farming activity. If I summarize like that, you don't have to score for the farm and the farming repeatedly, because what I've done is just a summary of my description. Also, if you ask a question and a person is repeating something just because you prompted, for example, if people run dry after 30 seconds, they're not saying much, you can say, is there anything else happening? When you ask that question, they may say again, oh yeah, as I said, there's a horse. They may repeat the same thing because you asked them specifically, is there anything else happening? That is also not scored. That's not perseveration. They're not repeating themselves without having that awareness of repetition. So all of these are warranted repetitions. If you see this is the reason they're repeating, you don't score that. But if the repetition is unwarranted, then you will score it. So people repeating the same idea without really realizing they've said it earlier, that's a simple repetition. If they're repeating something from a different picture on one picture, so the picture I first showed you had a horse in it, and then there's a bridge dock picture. There is no horse there. If a person mentions there is a horse in the second picture, clearly it's contrary to the evidence. In that way, you'll score them 1. It's contrary repetition. Or if they say in the first picture, if they say there is farming going on, and the second picture with the dock, they again say these may be farmers. They may also be just back from farming. That is repetition, but not completely unsupported, because you have some data that people are carrying. In fact, if you know the second picture, the dock picture, there'll be people carrying haystacks on their head, trying to load something in a godown, and the whole building looks like a farm storage, barn storage area. So some evidence that supports. Of course, you don't want people to bring ideas from another picture to a new picture, but it's a unsupported repetition, not contrary repetition in that case, right? So here you will score 0.5. Sometimes you can also see people doing that within the same picture. In the farm picture, let me see if I can show you the farm picture. Is it here? So this is the farm picture. In the farm picture, there is a woman here who looks like she's holding her belly. She looks like she may be pregnant. I mean, I don't know if she is. She may be pregnant, or she may be just having problems a lot of us have, trying to shed some weight. We don't know what that is. So if a person says, oh, this lady may be pregnant, and then also repeats that for this girl carrying books, this girl may also be pregnant, that's really like completely not warranted. That's unwarranted repetition. So you will score that within the same picture. Repeating unwarrantedly an information will also be scored. Is that clear? So those are the 3 items that we score for repetition: simple, unsupported, or contrary. I haven't seen many contrary repetitions. I've scored like thousands of this TLI thing. So when I say I haven't seen, these are very rare. But often people do simple and unsupported repetitions. So for example, so I've given you some examples here. What is not a repetition? What is a repetition? So here, the man is plowing a field. He has a horse. And then after a while, they say the man is plowing straight furrows in the field. Would you count this as a repetition, as a perseveration? You won't, because the second one is adding a little bit more detail. So the repetition was done with a purpose. So this is not perseveration. And they're also saying, as I said before, the horse is helping him. They're hedging the repetition. They're being aware that they're repeating. So these are not perseverations. Okay. And then if the person uses the same stock phrase repeatedly, again you have to rate that. Now again, be careful with the stock phrases. Some stock phrases are habitual. Fillers are always habitual. Like is always habitual. I don't know how much the word like gets used in the areas that you live in, but here I see very often in Montreal, people use like for everything. Uh, like this, like that. I can't say in sentences. I rarely use them, but I think you know what I mean. Some young people always use like all the time, and you should not count that as a repetition. It's not something that it's habitual. It's not a perseveration at all. But if people use stock phrase, they use the same word to describe many things. That would be a perseverative response. For example, I've seen some scripts where transcripts where um, the person was saying an odd description for this was an odd word as well, um, for the pregnant woman. They were calling her the wife of the working man, something like that. So no, they were calling the person the working man's woman. Working man's woman. That's the statement that they put. Very odd phrasing. You will score it for peculiar word at some point. But this is the sentence that they kept using for all the women that they see on the picture, all the female characters. So that's repetitive, and that's clearly like repetition without any specific, any added meaning, stock phrases. You'll score them as well, 0.25, and you'll score every time that happens. So if they use it 3 times, you will score 2 times 0.25, which will add up to 0.5. So 1 repetition 0.25, second repetition 0.25 as well. And if it's completely unsupported, 0.5, and if it's contrary, 1. So let's see an example. Let's look at an example here. Again, I'm going back to the same transcript. Training set 1, picture number 3. This is the picture form here. And here, see what they're saying. So this is like a prairie, That's a start, a false start. They're just, confirming the false start, like a prairie. And this is like people and a horse. They're using like very often, but I don't score them for like. This is the kind of like that happens when you try to convey something and hesitate when you're conveying it. So we don't call that as a perseveration. But look at this one here. It looks like they're fertilizing because they have a horse and everything. And it looks like, I guess they're fertilizing the soil. So there is a repetition here without any more information. Of course, the soil, but soil is not an information. It's really the same idea, same theme that they conveyed earlier is coming back again. There's no more quality attached to it. So the idea that fertilizing is going on is repeated. It could be repeated for many reasons, but the person has simply repeated it. So you will score that as a simple repetition. It has happened only once, not twice. So only 1.25 score. We haven't scored for like. We haven't scored for prairie. We also not scored for here. It looks like, it looks like, it repeats. It's also false start. This kind of false starts, people are like building their idea. You don't score them for repetition for that. Okay. Um, yeah, so this is 0.25, simple repetition. Any questions on that? Okay, right. So let's move on to one more item, looseness, and then have a short break. So looseness is probably the most critical item for positive formal thought disorder, positive FTD. Just like poverty of speech for negative FTD, looseness is for positive FTD. It's the most commonly scored item when you score positive FTD. You will see other things like peculiar words and peculiar sentences, but they're not very common. This one is very common when people are disorganized. So what is looseness? Looseness is having intrusions in your response. So you have something suddenly interrupting or intruding, not because of the external environment, but in your own mind, some thought is coming that is not connected, and you speak about the thought, and it doesn't have direct relevance to the picture. This could be a simple incidental comment, not related to the picture. But when we make those simple comments, we go back and stay on course again. So we go away on a tangent and then we come back. If that happens on a momentary basis, very brief tangent, you rate it 0.25, it's questionable. You rate it as 0.25, and every time it happens, you rate it one more time. So this is looseness, 0.25, incidental comments. You should not score distraction. If there's somebody having a phone call or a sound outside and they're talking about that, that is not incidental comments. Incidental has to be internal distractions, which you cannot see in your eyes. It's happening because of reasons that you don't know why. And that's very common. Many of us will have that. Suddenly an idea come and we put that out before we forget it. Drift is more pathological. So drift is where people like slowly move from one to the other and don't come back. They just move away from the topic. There are many terms in psychopathology for this, night smooth thinking, derailment, many different terms have been used, metaphorical terms. But drift happens when people move away from the element of discussion and don't come back to it. Or they will come back when you prompt them. You have to tell them, well, you were describing the picture, can you go back to it? You have to say that for them to come back. If you have to say that, they've drifted. They moved away from the topic. And again, score it every time they do it. Every time they drift away, every time you have to put it back, you have to score that. Drifting is not a repetition. So if people are just repeating something, it's not same as drifting. But if they repeat after you prompt them, the same thing happens again, then you will score it. So perseveration is not same as looseness, but if people are repeating the same drift, you will score them 2 times. Is that clear? Rusbe? Yeah.
Just a question about administering the test. Do we have to prompt them and direct them to go back to the same topic, or we have to leave them continue what they want to say?
In the discourse protocol, the 3-minute brief version that we use, there is no specific instruction to prompt like this, Um, I would say just don't prompt, let them drift in the 1 minute so that we can score it. But this was the original scale description that Peter has given. So if people drift off completely and don't give any useful information, you could prompt them back, or you could feel like you should prompt them to bring it back. You don't have to prompt them, but you have a feeling if you don't prompt them, they're not going to come back. And that is the definition of drifting. They moved away. Okay. If you apply discourse protocol, don't prompt, just wait for people to. It's okay if they go drifting, that's not a problem for you. The third one is non-logical connection, this 0.75. Here you will see people flying from one thing to the other, like jumping from one idea to the other. It's not a slow drift, it's very abrupt. Suddenly some idea come, completely disconnected with what's going on. It could be because of the sound associations like clangs, for example. that'll be called that'll be scored 0.75. You won't know why they did what they did, how they drifted, and it'll be why they had this incidental comment. It'll be abrupt, and they won't go back, or they will keep doing the same kind of flying from one to the other. Often seen in people with manic phase of illness, they'll be drifting, jumping from one to the other. Sometimes the jumps can happen because of external distractions. Again, we don't score for that. This is jumping without any obvious reason. And finally, the response is completely tangential. So you ask a question about a picture, but what they say is nothing about the picture, nothing about your initial question of talk about the picture. It's completely tangential. And that's called unrelated response. Again, this is rare, but could be present in established cases of schizophrenia. Jess?
I'm not sure I understand the difference between the incidental comment
Yeah.
and the 0.75, because wouldn't the intrusion of a loosely related or
Yeah.
unrelated idea be the jumping?
Yeah. So the main difference between 0.25 and everything else is if people come back or not. So if I make an incidental comment, I will have some awareness and say, okay, let me come back to the picture, or I will come back to the picture because I know I drifted, I went off. So incidental comments are corrected by the person more often than not. They may not correct, obviously, they may not say, oh, I drifted, I'll come back to it, I'll come back to it. But you will see in the whole transcript, they will be back to the picture, some elements of the picture, some story in the picture. But everything else, they don't come back. Either gradually they drift away, or they abruptly shift to something and never come back to the picture, or talk about something unconnected to the picture, something that came to their mind. You'll see people remembering something about a trip or a vacation that they went on and talking completely about that and not about the picture. So that's a kind of a drift that did not end up in a return. You will score it 0.5 or 0.75 based on how severe it is. Yeah. Any other questions on this looseness? Dalil.
Yes, I have a question about when the subject, the participant is trying to describe the picture. Let's say he starts with general description, like it's a black and white picture, something like that, and then he moves on to the details,
Yeah.
and then he comes back to something more general.
Yeah.
Should we consider that as a drift, or as long as he's still describing the picture, it's not a drift?
This is a very good question. So many of us have this tendency when we have a task, we want to first give some sort of anchors to the listener. We want to say, okay, let me tell you what this form scene means to me, or let me tell you what is going on in this black and white picture. So that's a very general statement before they go into anything specific. And they may finish also with saying, okay, in summary, this picture is about this. All of that is not abnormal. That's fine. So the key phrase to remember here is there any visual grounding in the picture description? Are they talking about something that is either present in the picture or something as an idea that's related to the picture in front of them? If it is grounded on the visual reality, then there is a logical connection. Whether that's a big idea connected to the small idea or two small ideas connected to each other, doesn't matter. As long as there is a grounding that comes from the picture that is basically about the picture is black and white. Sometimes people talk about the artistic nature. There is this the dark picture where you see this eclipse like sun, it's a dark sun. People start talking about making comments about the types of artistic works and stuff. Immediately come back. Most people do that, incidental comments about style of art, and then they come back. But some people just go off to, them visiting a gallery, them having interest in some training about different arts or art history. Some people talk about. It also, for some reason, reminds people of Japan, because the land of rising sun. I think the sun and the blackness and the flag's color makes them think about Japan, and they talk about Japan and they just go away, don't come back. They've drifted. So, those kind of thing you will rate. But if they say general things and then come to parts, as long as they are coherent and they're visually grounded, you would not rate it abnormal, Delhi. Any other?
Lena, you may have already said this and I missed it, but what's the maximum you can score in each of these domains? Is it one or can it be more than one?
Oh, infinite when it comes to theoretical
Okay.
maximum, because you could have all the 50 words as repetitive words and you could have 49
Okay.
as generally we don't see people scoring more than like 3 points, 3 overall for total TLI scores in a minute. but theoretically you can have longer. Okay, excellent. So that's looseness. Any more questions on that looseness piece? Let's look at this picture here. This is the one I kind of deliberately put in. This is a poor quality recording. Hopefully, none of your recordings should look like this. This is a recording where we just couldn't make out some of the unclear words. This was done like 15 years ago before we developed discourse protocol and how to record it and all those kind of things. So yeah, this is a tape recorded stuff that I had. Now, if you look at this, would you say there is any looseness here? So the person says, this is about this picture, the dog picture. They say something that we can't really make out, 5 unclear words. They show something to the bank and then some more unclear words and then say that you could hide the body as if I would take the down the river. That's what they said. There was some pause between there and down the river, I think, but clearly this was one single utterance. They say that you could hide the body as if I would take the down the river. And anything else we ask, they say there is something there, but again, we don't know what they said. Now, I scored it for looseness here because, where is this idea coming from? Hiding the body. I mean, there is nothing in the picture that tells you there is a body being hidden. It, it is a stretch. You could make up some peculiar idiosyncratic reason for this. You might think this person looks shady, they might hide a body, but still hiding a body is not the immediate probability that will come to your mind when you think about it. So if you look at the looseness scoring, the previous thing I showed you here, this could be just incidental. Some loose, unrelated idea came to them, and they might just return back to the normal description of the board, the picture, the bank that you see, the river bank. Here we don't know what they said, so we don't know how much they returned to. They do talk about the river, so there's a river here. They also say something else is there. So I'm giving them the benefit of doubt. They've returned back at some point, but they did say something about the body, which again could be very idiosyncratic to them. They might have some reason why they said it, but nothing outside suggests there is a body, and nothing in the picture suggests there is hiding the body thing going on. So you would put this as an incidental intrusion that happened in their mind about some dead body or something, and they have spoken it out when they describe the picture. So you'll give it 0.25. If you know a little bit more about what exactly they said, no unclarity at all, no lack of clarity, you might be able to score more on this. You might go to 0.5 instead of 0.5. For example, if we know that they still talk about the body, they talk about what else can come with the body, mortuaries, cemeteries, and things like that, which are not related to the picture, then the drift is complete. You will score 0.5 for that. I haven't scored 0.5 because of lack of information. I scored 0.25 here. Yeah, any questions on that? Okay, great. So I think we've been here for what, an hour now? Let's just take like a 5 minutes break, maybe. It's 11:10, so let's come back. 11:10 here where I am. So let's come back in 5 minutes. Just add 5 minutes to your clock, and we'll be back here.
About this specific example. From when I had this example yesterday, I put a score of 1 because the description said, for 1, it was like unrelated responses. There is no discernible connection between the responses and the pictures.
Yes.
And from what I read, I couldn't find anything related to the pictures. That's why I put 1. So I was kind of surprised that finally it's a 0.25. Why wouldn't it be at least 0.5 or 1?
Yeah, good question. So let's go back, and maybe we should think a little bit more about this, right? So I don't know if I can go back my slide. Something has happened to my slide. Okay, can you see the description now on the looseness? Am I sharing the right thing? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So here, Dalil, you rated 1, right?
Yeah.
And that's because you thought there's no connection between the responses and the picture. So hiding the body, the responses, there's no connection. Exclude perseveration of ideas. Okay, let's leave that. But there's no connection between the responses and the picture or the inquiry. Now, the important thing here is not to look at like sentence by sentence for this last item. Unrelated response means the whole response should be not related to the question. The question was describe the picture. Okay. Did the person say something about displayed items in the picture? They show. Yeah, that's related. So they're answering the question. What is going on in the picture? You ask them, you give the picture to them and you ask them what's going on. Tell me what is going on in the picture. And they're saying they show, we don't know what they said, but they're describing something in the picture. So they're not completely going tangential to not responding or talking about last night I had a dream, this is my dream, things like that. So that would be like extreme case, okay? And
Okay.
another reason why I don't call this completely tangential is because they're pointing to some elements in the picture. So they're pointing to the river. They're pointing to, you know, something else which we don't know. There is lack of clarity here, but they're pointing to the river which is here. They're talking about some of the elements in the picture. So they're still on the task of describing the picture, but the connection, the idea that they put forward is, you know, some of you may say it's not connected at all. Some of you might actually say this is 0.5. Sorry, I'll go back to this. 0.5 because the uh, the topic, the item that they've talked about is completely unrelated to the picture. Now the question is hiding the body completely unrelated or not to this picture? Let's go back to the picture. This is not too big, but I think all of you can, if I just do a little pull together of this, maybe you can see this. I'm still feeling it. Give me 1 minute. Okay, is that better? Can you see the picture now? So is there any possibility of hiding a body here? There's a woman. There are some characters. Often people say these characters are shady. There looks like a guy here trying to supervise other people who are carrying something. We don't know what that is. There's a river. There's a boat. This particular scan is not the best, but the actual printout is a little brighter. So yeah, how many of you think there is some connection to hiding something in this picture? Federico say yes, Jess say yes, yeah. Some of you think it's yes. Yeah, I think, you know, it's not completely something that we can rule out. Like you can have a hiding activity. You can have some shady activity in this picture. It could be hiding something. It could be hiding money. It could be hiding bond, hiding grains. It could be a storehouse where people are taking something and hiding. Um, and then hiding the body seems a little bit more far-fetched. There could be a good reason the person has to bring up a body. It may be related to the delusions, I don't know. It may be something to do with their own past experiences, I don't know. But the fact that I don't know is the reason why we think this is unconnected idea. Uh, And because there is some plausibility the hiding is going on, we might say this is not completely tangential. It's just an incidental thing. Very likely they drifted and did not come back, but I have very little information because of lack of clarity of the recording. So I'm going to just stick to being erring on the side of caution, being more conservative with my rating, not calling the patient more thought disordered than what they are based on lack of clarity I have. Okay. Right. So let's go back to the next item. Any other questions on the looseness, please? Okay, now next three items are a little bit straightforward, more easy. Next four items actually: peculiar use of words, peculiar use of sentences, and then you have distractibility and peculiar logic. There are four things. So peculiar use of words is what it says on the description. The word that people use are not the words that you and I have heard of. Unusual word usage. Now, they don't have to be always like completely new, out of dictionary words. Sometimes what happens is people use words that are out of context, and those are questionable abnormalities. You will say 0.25 for it. You will not say 0.5 or 1. You would rate it 0.25. It's questionable, people using words out of context, right? Now, you have to be a little careful with this because someone who did not grow up speaking the language in which you're rating them may use words that are not usual. So um, what is an example that comes to my mind? yeah, there are the many things that people may not use the exact words. It doesn't strike me immediately. Does anyone have any examples you could think of? Unusual words out of context, but not completely abnormal? Okay, take the scone, for example. People who like scones, who live in Britain, like scones. Scones is what you eat for coffee. We eat with tea or coffee in the afternoon, in the tea time. Some people may call scone as like a baked biscuit or a cookie. It's not completely abnormal. It's just that they're not used to calling it scone. They call it, it's a baked biscuit or a cookie. So you won't think of that as a neologism. You won't score 1 for it. You won't score 0.5 for it. If that unusual word usage is clearly not connected to their background, you might give them 0.25. It's important to know a little bit about the patient's background. A person with no education in English, trying to speak in English, even though they're fluent, might have some abnormalities in the way they speak. It's best not to rate any of those things. It's important to have some idea. It's easy to say, difficult to do in practice, because often you may not have seen this person, you may not know anything about them. So always like think in terms of could you have used this word if you're not living in that area, if you're not living in that place and not having the same background, would you use this word or not? If it's possible that you might have used that way, you probably should not rate it. You should just think of this as normal, not questionable. So only when you are sure that this is pretty unusual, give them 0.25. In doubt, just give them 0. And then comes private terminologies. These are very obvious. These are not words that, you can make sense of them, but not words in dictionary. So for example, for a glove, if a person says hand shoe, yeah, you can make sense of what is a hand shoe. It's like, wearing a shoe in your hand. It covers the hand, so it's in the hand, but it's the word they're using for a gloves. So it's private terminology. Understandable because they're putting two tokens together, which makes some sense to you, but still it's kind of not in the dictionary, not a public knowledge word. So you would give them 0.5. Neologisms are completely invented words, made up words, and not true. Um, Sometimes, people have these neologisms within a group, so you have to be a little careful. But, if the words are completely unheard of, you should rate them. No unusual usage is 0. Contextually odd is 0.25. Idiosyncratic private is 0.5. And neologisms is 1. Colloquialisms are not scored. So sometimes people use colloquial stuff. If you live in Yorkshire, for example, you will say summit, somewhat. Summit is very often, and it could be transcribed as SUMMAT. I don't know how many of you heard of that word. It's not a common thing at all. But in Yorkshire, it's very common. So you should not rate that. This is a colloquial use, it's a slang in some sense. You should not be rating it. So at least you should have a knowledge of where the speech recording comes from. Is it coming from Cardiff or Montreal? You need to have that information. Without that, it becomes really hard to rate these things. In fact, this reminds me, there is a very nice paper, like a short paper written by Oliver House, who I think this was done many, many years ago. He's not someone who does much work in formal thought disorder, but he observed some patients in the Maudsley at the IOP who were speaking in, young persons speaking in huge amount of slang. And if you just look at the recorded speech, you will think they're fully thought disordered because they're full of slang. They say things like, um, words like rhubarb, Pringles. Well, we know what Pringles is, but they use the word in a very different context. Um, they have words like Heinz, the sauce company, the ketchup company word. But this is within their own in group. It's a slang. They've been using it this way. So Oliver explains in this paper why this is not thought disorder. But you will know this only if you know who the person is. It's easy to get a wrong conclusion. Having said all that, it's quite rare that you see neologisms and stuff in the samples that we study for the discourse protocol. If you're in doubt, always ask someone else in that area. Is it a slang? Is it a word that gets used or not? In any language that you speak, it's important to know the local context. So in this picture, is there any unusual words? There are a lot of unclear words. But each word, like hide, body, river, they're all like normal. So 0 here. There's no peculiar words in this case. In fact, I tried to look at some of the transcripts I've done recently to see if there's any peculiar words. There was not any at all. So I don't have much examples to give you. It's pretty rare to have this. A peculiar sentences are a little bit more common. So what is a peculiar sentence? This is where the syntax is problematic. It's awkwardly phrased sentences which are not corrected by people. If the expression is very like old-fashioned, pedantic, stilted, you give them 0.25. Stilted or pedantic means it's old-fashioned. It's something like written language, not like spoken language. So people saying things like, I feel bad because this morning, so they say things in a very like a formal way. And that's stilted. And that's not abnormal. It's a way of expression. So we'll put it questionable pathology and we'll give it 0.25 according to TLI scale. 0.5 is given when the sentences are really oddly constructed. And 1 is odd construction plus poor meaning as well. The construction is odd. They're using conjunctions, prepositions, and things which are not making, not making the sentence readable. At the same time, it's very hard to understand any meaning from what they put together. So it's like a word salad. There are many words, they look like sentences, but they don't really convey any meaning. That becomes incoherent. Incoherent is seen when people are, fully thought disordered, like quite severely thought disordered. You often see this kind of stuff. Again, in our samples, the ratings of 1 are not very common. So I'll give you one example of this. Oh, this is just examples of each item. So structurally normal means grammatically intact. Pedantic means like written format, awkwardly phrased. Odd construction affecting clarity is 0.5, disrupted phrasing. Word salad is incoherent fragments. So the difference between 0.25 and 0.5 is 0.25 is grammatically correct. It's just old-fashioned. 0.5 is grammatically incorrect, but you can make meaning out of it. You can make some sense what it is. If it's grammatically incorrect, you cannot understand, then you would put 1. Yeah? So let's look at this one. The same sentence, which comes back to the question Rusbe that you asked earlier. Can you score 2 different items for the same sentence? Yes, you can. So here they're saying, then say that you could hide the body as if I would take the down the river. Clearly the grammar kind of disintegrates at some point here. You can make sense up to the point, then say that you could hide the body. Yeah, makes some sense to me, hiding the body. And then they're connecting with as if, and then they say I would take the down the river. The articles are misplaced here. Clearly there is a disruption of grammar here. I still make some sense. I mean, they're talking about 2 things. One is hiding the body, and going down the river. I don't know whether they're going down themselves or somebody else is going down, but 2 ideas. Down the river is one idea, hiding the body is one idea, connected in a very odd way, doesn't make immediate sense to me. So here I've given it 0.5 rather than 1. To score 1, this has to be like so incomprehensible to me that I don't get the idea of hiding the body. I don't get the idea of going down the river. If it is like that, I would give it 1. Because it's not like that, with some effort, I'm making some sense of it, I'm giving it 0.5. You guys are following me so far? Yeah. Okay, great. Here I have a couple more examples. In picture 3 of the same training set, you'll see there is a sentence, all I have a shock. Again, grammatically incorrect. But I think they're trying to say, all I am left with is a shock, or I'm shocked, something like that. So you can make some sense of this. I would give it 0.5 as well. There's one more sentence they say, there is about a building with a child, even say the word around me because it's disgusting. This person is quite thought disordered if you look at it. This sentence is clearly like hard to make any sense of this. About a building with a child, I don't see any child first of all here. Even say the word around me because it's disgusting. There may be some pieces of information, but again, only part makes sense. So 0.5 for this one, 0.5 for this one, you will add it up and it's a score of 1 for this. You might give 1 for this. I mean, for me, it's really like a difference between how much can I make sense of and how much can you make sense of. Between 1 and 0.5 for the second one and around 0.5 for the first one. So this lack of clarity is always a problem with qualitative rating scales. One person may rate 0.5, other may rate 1. So in the last slide, I have some recommendation how to overcome some of these challenges. But the most important thing is to, if you have access to another person, and if you have a doubtful phrase, just check with them, does it make sense for them or not? Sometimes we can get completely tangled with processing this information, the sentences. We may be able to make sense because we've been seeing this picture a lot. Other person may rate it as 1. So check with somebody and come to some sort of consensus scoring based on the reasoning. I would say always like rate in pairs if you can, and discuss and then finalize the score. We've done, myself and Mike McKinley, most of the scoring we have done for all of our previous studies. We've rated it in 2 different places and we have discussed it together and come up with some consensus. It works better that way. Roosbay?
Yeah, just want to check. Did you accumulate points for the example, picture 3?
Um, so,
Is it like
oh,
0.5 plus 0.5?
the way I put 1 here is I gave 0.5 to each of these 2. So I added them to 1. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that this one is 1. I mean, I was saying some of you might think the second one is completely 1 because you don't
Completely one.
it's for me. Yeah.
Mm.
For me, it was 0.5. Yeah. Again, the question is, does it make any sense or is it completely incomprehensible? If it's completely incomprehensible, no doubt we just give 1. A completely incomprehensible sentence will be grammatically incorrect. Hard to produce one on the fly, but you can think of a sentence where it starts with about, for example, go to with, about with, and a couple of articles. It just doesn't make sense. For humans, it's difficult to produce it, but when you have a significant thought disorder going on, you may end up with sentences like that. Okay, great. So that's the second item, peculiar sentence, second item of the second part. The third item of second part is peculiar logic. Now, peculiar logic is somewhat overlapping with looseness, but the question here for peculiar logic is how do people give explanations? What kind of logical explanations coming up for items that they describe in the picture? So it's really not about making one comment. It's about making a conclusive statement, a causal statement, for example, and the logic behind the causality, the description that they're coming up with. So that's the most important thing about peculiar logic. You can have an idea that's intrusive, and that idea that's rated for looseness could also have an illogical basis. Okay, you will rate both looseness and illogicality. So what is illogicality? What is peculiar logic? Reaching conclusions based on inadequate evidence or faulty processing, faulty logic. The judgment reflects peculiar logic, and in original TLI scale, it says you should inquire about these things and make a judgment only after that. As I said earlier, we don't do that with the discourse protocol, given the variation this introduces. So you need to go by the judgment that you make based on the visual evidence, what is in the picture, and what did the person say overall about the picture? Is the logic there? Is the logic not there? Okay, so this is what you need to do. There are 3 types of illogicality. One is unjustified conclusion. So you can say, you can look at the picture, for example, and say the drought has ruined the farmer. The farming picture, the shirtless man. There is no evidence of this. I mean, it looks like there is no crop. It's only like land. So you can say there is some evidence, slight evidence that there is no crop. So probably the farmer is unhappy, but there's no evidence there was a severe drought, the farmer is ruined and things like that. So unjustified conclusion. And they're saying that with conviction. They're saying there is a severe drought. They're not saying perhaps there was a drought. Maybe there was a drought. It could be the person is, distraught. They're not saying anything like that. They're not hedging it. They're just saying there is a severe drought. This ruined the farmer. It sounds very unjustified. Okay, the conclusions is reached without any justification. So that you would score as 0.25. Sometimes you'll have reasoning without any distant connection at all. The conclusion is completely non sequitur, which means it doesn't follow anything that's in the picture. It's not about the farm. It's not about the farmer. It's not about the possibility of the drought that you could argue for. It's completely illogical, completely unconnected, and that's 0.5. It's not contradictory, but it's just uncalled for. There's no logic in how they come to the conclusion. 1 is given if it's contradictory. So, for example, the woman looks pregnant, but if you say the woman just had an abortion, she still looks pregnant, for example. It's a bit contradictory. You can't really say if that's the truth here. It's related to the picture, but contradictory. For example, the dog picture, there is a woman on the bridge. She's trying to, look down. She may be trying to jump, we don't know. But if a person says, uh, if a person says the woman is on the boat, for example, it's completely illogical. The woman is not on the boat, she's on the bridge. So conclusions that contradict evidence without any hedging, you will score them as 1. Again, very rare, but if you see this, this is 1. Evidence that's the opposite of contradiction. Between unjustified, illogical, the main difference is, can you say there is slight evidence or not? If there is some slight evidence, you would put it as unjustified. If there is no evidence at all, you would put it as 0.5. If the evidence is arguing for the opposite, then you would say 1. If there is any hedging, you will not rate it. So that's a reasonable speculation. I mean, saying the woman is pregnant is a reasonable speculation, especially if the person says she may be pregnant. She's standing in a way that she looks she's pregnant. She may be pregnant, or she's just getting obese or whatever. Those kind of statements where there is uncertainty added, hedging added, reasonable, 0. You won't score them 0.25 or 0.5. Okay. Let's look at this picture. There's a peculiar logic here as well. Same sentence, the problematic sentence. Hiding the body is somehow connected with the logic of taking down the river or going down the river. Again, it's not clear. This could be justified for the person, but for us, it's kind of unjustified. You don't know. It's not explained by hiding a body is not explained by going down the river. Hiding a body is not explained at all, first of all. It's just not clear how they came to the idea. But clearly, the causal explanation, as if I would go down the river, is not logically connected to this. It's very peculiar and unjustified logic. There's no contrary evidence. There's no evidence the person is, not able to go down the river, for example. There's no contrary evidence of the person. There's no contrary evidence of instead of river, if you have something else, for example, the evidence is contrary. That's not the case here. And the best rating you can give here is 0.25 for this person. It's peculiar logic. And that comes from a peculiar sentence as well. The same sentence is also like incidental comment that they made. We don't know where the comment came from. It's not connected to the rest of the elements here. So one of the things you will see in coming to conclusion about logicality is the value of the statement itself, not how it's related to the other items. It may or may not relate to the other items. It may be completely disconnected, but the idea is the process, the reasoning behind the logic behind coming to a conclusion. That's what you're looking at. And generally that is stated in the same sentence or immediately before and after. The connections with other elements of the picture is not required. And that's required for rating drifting. You want to see if it's away from or tangential, but for logicality, you don't need it. There's one more example here. There is a third picture of a couple, like a cinema stars, like a movie star picture where there's a man and a woman. One of the persons we interviewed said the woman staring deeply, perplexed as to why he might be leaving. Maybe that's they're downtown, or he's doing something, I don't know. Prostitution? I'm not sure. This is what the person said. Now, it might look completely logical to bring prostitution here, but it's really well hedged. I'm not sure. I don't know. They're just making some speculation here. They're not sure about these things. So we didn't score this. We scored this as we scored this here as 0. It's a speculation that's kind of hedged, visually grounded in some sense. They're talking about downtown, they're talking about people here. Yes, prostitution is not immediately something that will leap into your mind, but the person is hedging it. They're saying it may be prostitution, I don't know. They're not claiming that's what's going on here. Okay, so these are some of the examples of rating peculiar logic. Any questions on peculiar logic, folks? Again, it's a very subjective, this is the most subjective of all. I think looseness is something that you had a little challenge with. This is the most challenging, illogicality, especially because we don't follow up. If you have a follow-up question, I will ask them, why did you say prostitution? Then I can see what is the process that went behind their thinking. So I have to go by the hedging. I have to go by how much the statement is conclusive and how much logicality is there within the statement itself. I don't know what is the thinking process. Yeah. Yes?
For this one and the prior two, do you ever rate a 0.75 if you're not sure, like if you're not sure if it's
Uh,
between
Yeah, no. So you either put zero point 0.5 or 1 because the actual rating scale doesn't have a description for 0.75. So what we've done is if I say zero point 0.5 and if Mike says 1, for example, in a rating that we're trying to come to a conclusion with, we just find a consensus. Is it possible that his argument has more validity? Why did he say it's contradiction? He might find something contradiction that I missed. So you go for that score. You could go for when you have two people not agreeing with each other, go for higher score because sensitivity is really important for this. Um, it, if you miss something the other person has seen, going for the higher score is a better option. And this is something all clinical rating scales do. If in doubt, just score up. Um, the difference between pathology and questionable thing has to be conservatively decided, but the rating between two severe scores should be decided based on what is sensitive, what is more sensitive, what is something that other people have seen that we have missed. Okay, any other questions on this peculiar logic? Yeah, this one will throw some challenges when you start rating, but we'll see how often that happens. Right, so the last item is again a very rare item, distractibility. I think it was much more common when you had like 8 pictures given the full scale. People get distracted at the end of the interview, the eighth interview, but 8 picture. But in the 3 picture version, we don't see distractibility that often. This is when people start describing your hat, your spectacles, your clothes, for example, as an interviewer, not talking about the picture, or talking about a picture on the wall, not talking about the picture that you show them. Those are distractibilities. Um, and the only one score. If you see it, you rate it 1. If you don't see it, you just don't rate it. There was one occasion when somebody that we were interviewing had a phone call. They had a cell phone and the call distracted them. Of course, it's an obvious thing and it calls for your attention. This is not the thing that is incidental shift of attention. This is calling for you to pick up and talk. We didn't rate it. It's not distractibility. It's really like specific to the person. It's not lapse of attention. It's not like moving on incidentally to a picture on the wall. So don't rate those things. When somebody specifically calls out the person by name, interrupts your recording, that's also not distractibility. It's incidental distraction. That's what we need. And this has to be to the environment around you. You'll often see that in bipolar persons who are going through a manic phase. You might see this kind of distractibility very often. Okay, so that's only one score. Just to summarize the ideas of rating here, and this is probably a key slide to keep in mind. There are points of uncertainty, but there are a few things that are really uh, cut across the 8 items. So number one, poverty of speech depends on count of number of words, timing of the prompts, and also number of prompts you give. And it also depends on the brevity of responses. If people are responding or not after prompting, all of this decide poverty of speech. It's very quantity based. It's rule based. It's probably the best thing that machines will pick up. If you teach a chat GPT system how to rate poverty of speech, how to rate any of the TLA items, because of lack of qualitative distinction, that much qualitative distinction, poverty of speech scores that machines do will be very close to scores that humans do. But other things require our judgment as a weakening of goal. It's reserved for speech that lacks informative content, not just imaginative or speculative content. People can speculate. People can have imagination running wild when they describe the picture. None of that is weakening of goal. It's just lack of informative content. That's most important for weakening of goal. The third one, looseness, is scored only when transitions are disconnected, not simply when the speaker shifts the topic from one item to the other. So when you see a picture like the farm, you have like many elements, many people, animals, houses and stuff. You will move from one to the other. That movement, that transition is not looseness. You call it looseness only when there's disconnection, not simply shifting from topic to the other. Disconnection could be intrusive idea, you don't know where it came from, it's internal distraction. It could be a slow, gradual move away and completely moving off the picture, drift. Or it could be a tangential response, not talking about the picture, talking about a dream, talking about their memories, talking about the vacation they took. All of that are tangential responses, and that will be looseness. Peculiar words are not slangs. We've seen that. So we need to make sure that we know a little bit about the slangs for the area that we are rating, the speech transcript we are rating. We need to know where it is from. Peculiar sentences require structural problems, syntax problem, not just hesitant phrasing and awkward fillers and stuff. Like people use like, all the time. They're not grammatical elements in any way, but that is not peculiar sentences. Sentence has to lack syntax, structurally odd, and if it lacks meaning as well because of incomprehensibility, you will rate it very high. Peculiar logic is applied when reasoning is unsupported, speculative, not merely imaginative. If it's hedged, the speculation hedged well, you don't rate it. Only if it is stated as a firm conclusion, you rate it. And if the firm conclusion is clearly idiosyncratic, you will rate it higher. If it is unsupported or if it's contradicted, then you will rate it the highest for peculiar logic. Finally, you need to have some differentiation between speech due to variation in speech that occurs due to the stimuli and the rated features. So what I mean by that is, um, you know, what we give is black and white pictures. We give these pictures which are less ambiguous compared to Rorschach, but still there is some ambiguity in them. For example, the sun thing that I showed you. Some people call it eclipse. Some people call it a sun hidden by like another planet or a moon. You need to give space for those kind of interpretations as well. They are not abnormal. It's just people's way of describing what is in the picture, and that's a normal variation. Okay, so that's primarily what I wanted to do. Now I had one picture here. This is also a training subject in your Word documents, picture number 2. I thought it'd be good to just go through this and see how we are all rating this. So let me see if I can ask all of you to rate it using the rubric that we have. Oh, this one has scores, so I don't want to show this. Let's go back to this one. So poverty of speech, weakening of goal, perseveration. Let's take these 3 and look at this picture here and see if we can rate it. Okay. What's the best way of doing it? Should we just ask people to give scores? Okay, let's do this way. Like whoever says poverty of speech as 0, just stay quiet. If you say 0, you don't have to do anything. If any of you think it's 0.25 or 0.5, just raise your hand, or raise your hand. I think that's easier. We'll discuss why that is. Well, remember the poverty of speech scoring, right? 0 means at least 50 words. 1 prompt is okay, but no more than that. 40 to 49 is the second level, 0.25. 1 prompt is allowed. If the sentences are brief, the prompts are early, you will score higher. Generally, these people will score less than 40 words, speak less than 40 words when they have anything more than 0.5. 0.75 is more than a prompt. Responses are always brief. And the last one is there's no good response at all. That's the highest one. So anyone giving 1? No? Okay, good. That's a good start. Look, we have consensus already. Anyone giving 0.75 for this? No. Okay. 0.5, anyone? Okay, well, this is a group of conformers, huh? Okay, no 0.5. 0.25, anyone? Okay, I don't see any 0.25s. Okay, good. So I think all of you agree this is 0, even though there is 1 prompt. Overall, there is more than 50 words. You agree with me? Yeah? And this 1 prompt is okay. I mean, this prompt is just to get the person going. There's no big hesitancy. There's a lot of information before the prompt. In fact, they're speaking like 44 words or something even before the prompt if you count it. So this is 0, and 0 is easy to come to a consensus with. All of us agree with this. This is good. So let's look at the second item, which is weakening of goal. This is about content, how rich the content is. Just to remind you, 0 means it's really good. There's connection between elements. It's a rich narration. It's like a story. It's nice to listen to this person. That's 0. 0.25 is people making list, not really describing connections between things, not converging on a description, or lacking quality, lacking adjectives, lacking adverbs. That's usually 0.25. 0.5 is really like vague generalization, not talking about a horse, but talking about an animal is generalization. And the last one is the highest score for weakening is empty speech, like saying things but not really saying anything at all. Empty speech is 1. So anyone for 1 for this one? No? No one's at all? Okay. 0.75, yeah, 0.75, right? I forgot the number now. Yeah, anyone for 0.75? 0.5? Okay. 0.25, anyone? Yeah, Federico, you said 0.25 and Apurva as well. Maybe Federico, you can say why 0.25.
Yeah, it seems that the subject is making more like a list of things without giving much detail.
Yeah.
So it's not like a story or a narrative as you would expect for 0.
Hmm. Yeah, okay. What is your reason, Neil? What did you also raised your hand for this?
I thought it was a bit unelaborated, no adjectives and those sort of things. I mean, they're just simple words.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Apurva?
Yeah, same. There seems to be a description of different items, but as a whole, it's not descriptive.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's what I thought as well. So clearly it's not vague. It's not like fully vague. They're specific about items. They're talking about sun, not just some celestial body. They have some specific information, but they're not connecting each other. They're not saying this is a scene where some theft may be going on, or it's a scene where, something dark is happening. They're not making a gestalt. They're just making a list of things, and the list includes many items actually. They talk about the houses, they talk about the activity that could be working, they talk about things like tools, bridge, sun, warehouse, water, ocean, river. So they make many things, but they're not connected with each other. This is a good example of an item that's kind of questionable weakening, which is 0.25, but not clearly 0. So let me just check if that's what I gave. Yeah, that's what I gave as well, 0.25. They're listing elements like houses, tools without any meaningful connection or elaboration. Now, those of you who gave 0, like, can anyone speak up and say why you thought it's 0? Farida, you gave a 0?
Oh no, I gave a 0.25.
Okay, you gave 0.25 as well. Okay. Yeah, okay. So I think the real thing is there a narration? Is there a connection? I think if that's missing, you can give it a 0.25. I think all of us agree on that. It's pretty good. What about the third item, which is what is the third item? Repetition. Is there any repetition? Is there any perseveration here? The sort of thing, sort of, that keeps repeating itself. Would you score it? Can you see that they're saying like very often? This is a like person. I they see a lot of likes, like tools, like a bridge. It also says sort of thing, sort of. Yeah, would we score it? I think we discussed this, right? No, this is not a perseveration. This is a repetition, but not a perseveration. This is not something we will score. It's a manner of speaking. Okay. Anything else you see? Any ideas repeating? Are they talking about any themes that are repeating? Yeah. Okay, there's a bridge. The word bridge repeats, but completely different context, as you will see. First, they're describing something that looks like a bridge, and then they're saying, after a prompt, the boat is going under the bridge. So that's okay. That is not perseveration at all. Okay. So this is 0. Good. Peculiar words, anyone? No. Peculiar sentences. The sentences are fragmented. But you know, this is the reality about spoken transcripts. We don't speak in sentences. We often speak in broken sentences. As long as they're not grammatically incorrect, we don't have to write peculiar sentences. These are broken sentences. It's normal to speak in this way when you're speaking. So no peculiar sentence, no peculiar word, any peculiar logic. No? Okay. What about well, no distractibility, I guess. What about looseness? Do you think they have anything incidental coming to the brain that is not connected to the picture, not visually grounded? Whatever they're talking about, like boat, bridge, water, warehouse, is there anything that's out of the picture?
I mean, the only thing I was thinking about, Lena, and I wouldn't rate this, is nothing bad. I mean, it wasn't quite sure why they were heading off that direction.
Yeah. Can you describe what you think might be going on? So the question is like a little bit more specific than we would like. They're asking, can you describe, this is the interviewer's question, what do you think might be going on? And their immediate response is nothing bad, which is kind of correct and is connected to the question, but you would not use that as the first response, right? Like if I ask you what's going on. Yeah. Yeah. Unusual. But like you said, Neil, you probably won't rate it.
But it is related to the question, I would say.
Yeah.
That's the reaction to the question, but not very often, not very usual.
Yeah. Some of us, when you ask, how are you? I say, not bad.
Yeah.
This is a variation of that, I guess. What's going on? Nothing bad. Yeah.
Nothing bad.
But these are very contextual as well, right? So, you know, if you're, unless it sounds like clearly deviant, pathological, best not to rate it.
Lena, can I ask a really pedantic question? But when you count the number of words, there's, there. I mean, does that count as one word or two or what?
So in the counting, we count that as well because it's actual fully formed spoken word. It's something in my mind, something. If they say that's okay, that's counted for the poverty of speech as a word count. But you know, it's very likely this person will have a poverty of content because they're just trying so much to remember a word, they end up not conveying useful quantitative information about the picture at the end of the day.
I was thinking more about the shortenings, like they are. Is that two words or one?
Ah, okay. So in automatic counting systems, actually count them as one word. If you're doing manual counting, this is like really like two-word count. What we have done so far is if people are on the verge, like 50 exactly or 49, and if you have some suspicion, you just have to split they are to they and are and give the benefit of doubt.
Okay.
It is not worth doing it for every transcript. So. Okay, great. So that's good. And you know, I think we had only one score for this one, 0.25. Everything else was 0. In our group, we generally write the rationale like this. Just after we score it, we put a little rationale. As you would have seen, we don't count the exact number of words because if it reaches 50, this is fine. You know, it's not going to be anything more than that. So you can do the same as well because this is helpful because when somebody else looks at it, they can see why you scored a particular number. And you will also remember when you reach the scores back, when you redo the scores, you will remember why you did it. Okay, so we have one more. I don't know whether we'll have time to do this. We can do this anyway. So this is the couple picture. Let's try this. This is also like easy to score because there's not many problems in this one. So first saw that. So let's see, first of all, poverty of speech. Would you rate this person for poverty of speech? Sorry. Each line, if I just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, around 12 words or 10 words per sentence, and you have more than 5 sentences. So this person is speaking more than 50 words. It's very clear for us. We can't score them for poverty of speech. So for weakening of goal, we need to know what they're saying. So what are they saying? This looks like it's maybe from, I don't know, maybe judging by the hairstyle, like the 20s. So this is the couple picture. There are two people, a man and a woman who looks like movie stars. It looks like a man and a woman, and it looks like maybe they've had an argument because the woman is clearly trying to stop the man from leaving. You can see how rich this particular sentence is. They're really describing it looks like maybe they've had an argument because the woman is clearly trying to stop the man from leaving. That itself is a nice example of someone's thinking being complex and rich. It's not vague, it's not generalized. Looks like maybe they're standing in front of a bar or a shop. It's also black and white. Man is looking very intensely, and he, even though it's black and white, it looks like he probably has a really intense, like blue eyes. If it if it was colorized, the eyes will be blue. It's not color, so they're adding some quality to their statements. The woman is wearing a white, like a V-neck blouse. He's just wearing a button down with the first few buttons undone. Yeah. Okay, any weakening of goal here? No. Okay, I think we all agree on that one. Perseveration. Is there any repetition here? Is the black and white repeating itself? So here they say it's also black and white. And then they say, even though it's in black and white, looks like he probably has an intense blue eyes. Would you count this as a perseveration?
There's context, there's additional meaning. So no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you might think that it is also black and white refers to the previous picture, right? There's another picture that was black and white, so it's also black and white. Again, it's not unwarranted repetition. Remember, if a repetition comes from a different picture, it has to be like unwarranted, which means there's no evidence, or it has to be contrary. The evidence is opposite. This picture is color. They're saying black and white. None of them is happening here. They're just adding information which is related very correctly to the previous picture. Both of them are black and white. So you won't count this as a perseveration here. What about anything else? Yeah, there is no other. I mean, there are some stock words they use. Like is repeating itself. Again, it's not an idea or a theme. So yeah, we won't count any of this as perseveration. Okay, looseness. Anything that is said that is not in the picture or cannot be connected to the picture, are only loosely connected? No. Actually, it looks like they're in front of a bar or a shop. You need to have the picture to know this. There is another painting on the back, which looks like a vintage painting, and it looks like a bar actually. So it's not false. Okay, so I think when you see the picture, you will see there is no looseness here, no peculiar words. I don't see any peculiar sentences as well. Anyone has any score for this? Logic? No? Okay, so this is like totally zero score, and this is actually a healthy person who completed the study a few days ago, actually, a few weeks ago. Right, so that brings us to the end of the session, folks. So just 3 points before we close this. There are many thoughts about how to make ratings reliable for any clinical scale. What generally people do when they publish papers is they do a session of inter-rater reliability. They take 2 or 3 raters to rate the same item, and then they report what is called an ICC, a correlation among the raters. And if it's like 0.7 or something, if it's good, that's it. Rating is done properly, and then many people rate after that, and the scores are reported. This is fine. This is acceptable. Many people do that. Not really optimal for something like TLI because, as I have said earlier, there's a lot of contextual decisions, there's a lot of qualitative decisions. There's also time changes how we speak. New slangs get introduced every time. So all of this means just simply doing one ICC exercise and forgetting about it is not the best way for reporting things like reliability in TLI. The best way forward is regularly revisiting the principles of rating. So this video will be there. The rating scale, the instructions for rating scales is also there. Annually, anybody rating for research studies, annually visiting this is important. Revisiting this video, probably an hour and a half if we edit it. So put some time aside, revisit the principles behind this. That's number one. Number two is always try to have one more person rating it. For zero ratings, generally the consensus is really good, like we saw for the second example. When it is zero, everybody agrees. It's obvious. Um, Take some pathological examples if you can, and try to have another rater to give their opinion. 2 raters are better than one. We've done that the same way for almost everything we've done so far. At least in different time points, 2 raters go through it and then get the more sensitive score. Don't average the scores between two people because you will end up with some odd numbers. For example, between 0.5 and 1, the average will be 0.75, and we don't have 0.75 for some of the items. So it becomes difficult to interpret that. Uh, Derive a consensus and err on the side of caution when it is difference between questionable and present, but be sensitive when the rating is between more pathological and less pathological, because it is the reasoning behind more pathological items that clinicians often miss. We often miss it. We just think it's normal. Language being very robust, we accommodate a lot of variations, which means we miss some of the variations. So it's important to discuss with the other person and rate higher if needed. So that's all it is. I will be stopping the sharing now and then see if there's any more questions. No questions, Ranjani? Any thoughts? No? Okay. Well, do some of these. We can send you some more samples if you're interested, and you can do the Excel sheet based rating. What will be helpful is at least people who are attending today, if you rate those three and come up with the scores, it gives us points of deviation from each other. It'll tell us what are the things that we're not agreeing on, and maybe the next time when we meet like this, we can use those examples and discuss why we deviate from each other. Yeah.
Sorry, I have one question. Can you hear me?
Yes, Sumita. Yes.
This is not quite related to the scoring, but out of curiosity, how does the stars capture differences in stages of a disorder? So if someone's not actively symptomatic.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good question. Well, it doesn't. Like every rating scale, the rating scales are prepared with a condition or a pathology in mind, but the way the rating scales um, perform varies with the stage of illness. So, a very good example for um, TLI is when the initial validation was done, Peter only had people with established illnesses on medication. So there was no idea how the scale will behave when people are acutely psychotic in unmedicated state, what scores will be high, what scores will be low. We have some data now on it, like the Topsy study we did was all unmedicated people or minimally medicated folks. So we know that three pictures are good enough. We know that we can have plenty of information from three pictures in acutely psychotic state. Whether the scores itself will tell you anything about stages, probably not. The scale is not made for that. So we can't really say anything about which stage of illness somebody is in based on the scores here.
And has it been validated across different stages, like first episode, prodromal, pretty later on, and
But TLI, not a formal validation simply across stages, but it's been applied across different stages. It's been applied to ultra high risk groups as well, first episode groups as well. So we have a paper, I can send it to you, on Acta Psychiatrica last year. It's Dalal, the person who wrote the paper is Tyler Dalal, where we looked at clinical high risk, first episode, established schizophrenia, and treated and untreated first episode, all four. And what we see is that the scale performs very similarly, but the actual language variable. So when you do a linguistic analysis using Luwick or something, the profile of linguistic abnormalities are different in different stages. For example, there is more negative symptomatology in established cases, less in acute cases, and that is reflected on the language variables that you use.
okay. Thank you.
Lena, quick question for you, and then I guess we probably all need to go. But I was just curious about the test retest on this. I mean, I know that I ramble more when I'm tired in the evening and probably deviate. I just wondered, has anyone looked at that and looked at,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
the effect of these environmental factors and whatnot?
Sure. So we can talk in general about the scales for formal thought disorder on this issue because it's not just a TLI problem. The test retest validation across all scales of formal thought disorder has not been, well done for two reasons. Number one, thought disorder itself fluctuates. So the minute you start treating someone, the symptoms reduce. So doing a proper test retest, which is not done on the same day, is very challenging. Symptoms vary too much. Number one. Number two, this is really a good example of what happens when there is a scientific precedence, somebody doing something and everybody doing the same. Nancy Andreasen, in her early TLC scale, argued that the only reliability that matters is inter-rater reliability for a scale like this, because that's where most of the errors and variance gets introduced. She said if somebody is going to have a particular thought disorder, whether you pick it up or not in two different examinations by the same rater depends not on the scale's performance, it depends on the fluctuation of the condition. So what matters really is inter-rater reliability. She made an argument for this and showed only the inter-rater reliability in the paper. And since then, every thought disorder scale has only done inter-rater reliability. They haven't really reported test retest reliability at all. So it is an issue. We have some data, which is like 1 year follow-up data that we have for WOW study, which Jess Ahrens has. We have some rating for that. I don't think we can show test retest reliability on this because it's 1 year. But what we can show is how much of these are trait-like and how much of these are not trait-like, how much are state-like. Yeah, so there will be some variations on that. So not a good answer for your question, Neil, but it tells you how bad the state of affairs is. Excellent, folks. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did. Have a good weekend and see you all at some point in the future.
Mhm.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
Lena.
Bye.
Bye.
You.